All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Bottom Line Live. We're doing this every Thursday at 7 p.m. Eastern, and I'm talking about my favorite subject, your favorite subject, all of our favorite subject, bookkeeping. Today, I'm going to be talking specifically I'm going to be answering a question that I get asked about a lot, which is what is the difference between bookkeeping and accounting, and also payroll. But mostly, what's the difference between bookkeeping and accounting? Because that is honestly what I get asked the most. People kind of confuse those things. And even other terms like finances, bookkeeping, accounting, treasury, what's the difference between a bookkeeper and a CPA? What's a tax preparer? All those things like that. So I'm going to answer questions that I've been asked. If you guys have any questions, either whether you're on my Facebook Live or if you are on my Zoom, type your questions in and I will try to answer them for you as best I can. So obviously I'm a bookkeeper. I am not a CPA. So if there's any CPAs that ever want to be interviewed about this same subject, I will interview you and you can talk more about it and make sure I'm not saying anything incorrect. I talk to lots of accountants and CPAs, so I've got good answers for this. But just in case any CPAs or accountants want to chime in, I'm willing. We'll listen. We will take your questions or your statements as well. All right, I'm going to share this to the Wealth Dynamics page, and they're my peeps, Jerry and Lexi. They got me doing this. So this is for their clients, my clients, potential clients, and people who have questions about bookkeeping. We answer questions. And also too, if anybody has any questions on other subjects that I haven't covered yet, or even ones that I've covered and now it's been a few months, feel free to ask and I will, go over it again. Things change. Okay, so without further ado, other than let me first actually remind everyone that it is tax planning season. If you don't have your books done, now is the time. Like if you want to get 2021 books done so you can file your taxes for the extension, you got to do it now. You got to send it to us now. There's already a waiting list. So reach out to me or, whoever, if you have a bookkeeper, reach out to them. But if you haven't given them your paperwork to be able to do that, to file your taxes, you're getting to the last second here. So I just want to remind everyone of that, as I will probably every week because the S Corp taxes and a lot of our LLCs, their taxes and S Corp are due September 15, and that is a blink of an eye away. So all right, now really without further ado, let me talk about bookkeeping. Let me give you an overview of bookkeeping, and then I'll give you an overview of accounting, and you'll see where there's similarities and differences and where they fall. So bookkeeping is basically going to be recording history. You're keeping a book of everything that ever happened in the transactions of that company. So all the income that ever came in, all the expenses that ever went out, any things that were purchased, bills that were paid, all that stuff. So that's going to be bookkeeping. Like, we're basically historians. We are the keepers of the books. We're writing down every single thing that occurs, or we're tracking it because, a lot of it's like automated these days, or we're not having to enter it all in or write it. And back in the day when bookkeeping first started, like probably, I don't know, however many hundreds and whatever years ago, there was basically these monks who would keep giant ledgers, giant books, and they would write down in the actual books the transactions. And I think that's why it's called bookkeeping. And now we keep your books, in QuickBooks and computers, and it's not a lot of writing in giant books, but it's a giant database full of stuff. So bookkeeping, that is like the basic definition of bookkeeping, right? Like, you're recording historically everything that has happened for a company's financial transactions. Now, when a company says that it does bookkeeping, it unfortunately can mean quite a few things. Like, because my company does full service bookkeeping. So what does that mean? That means that we also run payroll, that we also do sales tax, that we also do property tax, that we also do payroll taxes, that we also pay bills, and we also can send out invoices and collect money on your invoices. So that's everything that you would have in your finance department, your accounting department, you know what I mean, in a company. We do all that because we're a full service bookkeeping company. Now, some bookkeeping companies only do bookkeeping. For instance, if you hire QuickBooks Live bookkeepers, they only do financial records. So they will basically get your, QuickBooks, and they'll record all the transactions, but that's it. And this is a lot of bookkeeping companies. They won't do payroll, they won't do sales tax, they won't do all those kinds of things. And you either have to go to somebody else or a payroll specialist or whatever to do that. So there can be differences in what each company delivers, but I think that's kind of similar to when a marketing company says they do marketing. Like, great, that's a very broad term. Do they do LinkedIn marketing? Do they do, do they specialize in social media marketing? Do they specialize in PR? Do they specialize in branding? Do they do your website? So that's one of those things. So bookkeeping, if you look it up in the dictionary, Oxford says it's the activity or occupation of keeping records of the financial affairs of a business. And, that is the basic definition. So you're really keeping the records. Now, there's not a lot of good words to say, I handle anything in an accounting department, because even the word accounting can be confusing. If you look up the word accounting, it says the action or process of keeping financial accounts. So what is really the difference? It's hard to tell when you look it up in the dictionary, right? So that's why I'm going to kind of explain it to you. So there's just not really good words in the English language to say, we do everything that you need having to do with your finances for your company. So we call it a bookkeeping company, and we call it full service. So here is kind of a definition or a description of what the difference is, and I'll explain it more, but it says, bookkeeping focuses on recording and organizing financial data. Accounting is the interpretation and presentation of that data to business owners and investors. And I would agree with that. I would say accountants do higher level things than bookkeepers. They're going to do more of your audits, right? And an audit for accounting is, or for tax definitions, is looking very closely at all of the different transactions and making sure that they're all legitimate. They all have receipts. They're all correctly labeled. They all have to do with the business. There's no fraud. There's different things that you look at, but that would be an audit. So accountants do audits. What else do accountants do? Accountants do taxes usually. Not all accountants do audits. Not all accountants do taxes, but in general, right? So you're going to have higher level things having to do with presentation of it, having to do with taxes. A lot of accountants don't do bookkeeping, so they don't keep track of all the little tiny transactions that happen on a day-to-day. They just want to know at the end of the year, what are your numbers so we can do your taxes? Or what are your numbers so we can do tax planning? Or what are your numbers so we can determine, whether you're ready for an investor or whether you need to take a loan? There's all these different things. So that's kind of accounting. There's even certain transactions that occur in a company where your accountant would handle those transactions as opposed to a bookkeeper. We might be able to record it, but we're not going to tell you if you should or shouldn't. I can tell you that at a certain income level, it makes sense for a company, it makes sense to open an S corporation or to have your LLC taxed as an S corporation. But I can't tell you that for your specific tax situation, it makes sense because I'm not doing your taxes. So that's where you would go to your CPA and said, my bookkeeper said I should do this, but she said to check with you. And your CPA is going to look at all of the ramifications having to do with all of your taxes, your business, your personal, your kids, your property, all of that, and tell you whether it makes sense or not, because there can be different things of whether it would or wouldn't. There's also some larger transactions, like if you sell your business, if you buy new assets, where maybe your bookkeeper won't know the best way to enter that in your books for your accountant for the purpose of taxes. So I would contact your CPA, your accountant, and say, hey, how do you want this to show? Like, do you want me to enter it like this or like this? You know, so we're in close coordination with them. But most of the time, accountants aren't doing bookkeeping, meaning recording the historical, what happened day to day of your finances. Most of the time, they're doing higher level, they're doing audits, they're doing taxes, they're doing, you know, interpretation of the reports to help you make decisions on what to do next, things like that. So I would say that is the main difference. But you're gonna, because it's a broad term, just like marketing, you know, or advertising, you're gonna run into a lot of crossover. How many times have you talked to a marketing company thinking that they could do everything you need, only to find out they don't do graphic design? So they can build your website and they can even write the copy because they have a copywriter, but they don't have anyone that does graphic design. So you have to hire somebody else to do the graphic design, or they don't design your logo, they don't design your business card, or they do social media marketing, but only on LinkedIn, right? There's a lot of different things. People have their specializations, people have their skills, people have their likes and dislikes. So each company might not provide the same exact thing. For instance, there's some CPA firms that also do bookkeeping, but most of the time, if a CPA firm does bookkeeping, they don't do payroll, they don't do, you know, they really just, what do we need for the books in order to do taxes? And they started doing bookkeeping oftentimes because their clients didn't have the numbers they needed to do the accounting. So that's what ends up happening. Now, payroll, of course, is a topic that I can talk a lot about. Okay, does anybody have any questions before I start talking more about payroll? No. Okay. Feel free, of course, afterwards, if you're watching this on YouTube or you're watching this later, feel free to send me any questions. Maya@solvencynow.com, or you can go on my Facebook page, you know, lots of ways to get a hold of me. And I'll say them more at the end. So payroll is a very specialized process of setting up and running your payroll. And in the US, there are different payroll laws for every state. It's not just federal payroll. It's not like if you were doing payroll in, I don't know, another country, I'm pretty sure that the entire country, like all of England, probably has the same laws on payroll. But the US isn't that way. Every single state has its own laws. Every single state has different laws having to do with overtime, whether or not you have to pay out mandatory sick pay, whether or not you have to pay out, you know, when somebody quits or is fired, how soon you have to pay them, whether or not you have to pay out holiday pay, whether or not you have to have PTO, how overtime is calculated. For instance, in California, overtime is calculated as anything over 8 hours in a day, as well as anything over 40 hours in a week. So if you worked 10 hours in 4 days, and then you didn't work the 5th day for whatever reason, and you weren't like doing makeup time, or let's say you worked 2 hours the 5th day, you're still going to get paid for overtime for 8 hours because you worked 2 extra hours on 4 days, even though you only worked 40 hours. And then maybe this on the 5th day, you worked another 2 hours. So you're also getting overtime on those 2 hours. Whereas a lot of states don't calculate it that way. They just calculate overtime as anything over 40 hours in a week. So there's different things like that. Now, a payroll specialist has to either know all of those laws or has to have access to a database where they can find out all of the answers to all of those laws. So for instance, we have access to a database that tells us every law very easily for each state, because we have clients in every state. And not only do we have clients in every state, I mean, not every state, and a lot of states, but not only do we have clients in a lot of states, our clients have employees in lots of states, because a lot of companies are running remotely and virtually these days. So they have employees all over. And when you're running payroll, you pay payroll and you apply the law for that employee based on where they live, not based on where your company is. So if you have a Florida company, but this person is in California, and not so much, I guess, the overtime laws, but I actually have to check that. You might even have to apply the overtime laws, but like, okay, so let's skip California. But let's say you have an employee in Colorado, and Colorado has mandatory sick pay and Florida doesn't. you have to give them their mandatory sick pay. If they take a sick day, they get paid. It doesn't necessarily have to, there's no law saying it has to get paid out at the end if they quit or get fired. But if they take a sick day, they get paid for it. They accrue sick days up to a certain amount of days per year. That's how it works. California has that as well. So you are paying your employee based on the laws of where they are located. So this is very important. Now, most accountants and a lot of bookkeepers don't do payroll. There are payroll specialists that do it. We do payroll, it's full service because we have a full service bookkeeping company. So we do all of that. Not every company does it. So you're going to run into companies that you go, oh, great, can you do my bookkeeping? And they say, yeah, but you're thinking they're going to do your payroll and they're not. So you have to really make it clear from the very beginning exactly what your expectations are and find out whether or not they can do that. You know, for instance, I get asked if I do taxes all the time. So we do payroll taxes, we do property taxes, we do sales tax, but we don't do IRS taxes because that is done by a tax preparer or a CPA. But I think there are some people who call themselves bookkeepers who would do taxes because they are also tax preparers. You see what I'm saying? So you really have to find out what they can deliver and you have to tell them what you need. And so you can make sure that it's a right fit for you. Because it can get very confusing just because the English language has stupid words that are not as specific as we would like them to be. So they get a lot of overlap. You know, in a company, you would often call it an accounting department, but they're probably not filing the company taxes. They're probably collecting money, paying bills. You know, sometimes it's called the finance department. Sometimes it's called the treasury department. It depends on the company, but sometimes finance is considered as getting investors. But if you have a small company that doesn't get investors, it's bootstrapped, a finance department would not be getting funding or investments. A finance department would be paying bills and collecting money on invoices and doing bookkeeping. So these words, unfortunately, are all not specific enough and overused. But I will tell you, in general, bookkeeping is the tracking of all the day-to-day transactions. Not that it has to be done daily, because oftentimes bookkeeping isn't done daily. It's going to be done weekly, monthly, quarterly. But since the last time you did the bookkeeping, you're going to enter and track every single transaction, and then you're going to balance the books. So you're going to make sure that everything in the bank account is in the books and everything in the books is in the bank account. And, you know, there's no transactions that didn't occur, because if it's in the books and it didn't, if there's a check in the books that shows that you got 2 checks for $10,000, but only one of them is actual, and your books don't get reconciled and balanced to make sure that it matches the bank account, you might end up paying taxes on a $10,000 income transaction that doesn't exist. So a bookkeeper will always reconcile and balance your books to make sure that it matches. So, and there's definitely differences in the way that bookkeepers are trained and accountants are trained. So an accountant, in order to call yourself an accountant, most of the time, in most states, the law says that you have to have an accounting degree. Most bookkeepers don't have an accounting degree. I don't have an accounting degree. We learned from doing bookkeeping for companies, and we learned from doing tutorials on YouTube and on QuickBooks and learning it. And we don't have a degree. I've been doing bookkeeping almost 20 years. I never got a degree. I have some certifications, but it's not a degree. An accountant goes to school for 4 years, gets an accounting degree, then they go into their specialization. So they might go into certified management accountant, where they do audits and things like that. So they go, they do about, I don't know, something, I think it's 1,000 hours worth of working with another accountant. Then they go do a test, and now they have that management certification, or a CPA, which is a certified public accountant. They do a similar thing. They go get about 1,000 hours of experience, and then they go get it. They take a test, and now they have a certification. There's other ways too. There's different ways, you know, to do taxes. For instance, in Florida, I don't even think you have to be certified. You can just do taxes if you know how to do it. So there's a lot of different things. And in the end, you're going to have to ask the person that you're talking to exactly what they do. But I would give you a general idea that if they say they do bookkeeping, they track your transactions. You know, they're probably doing it using an accounting software such as QuickBooks, Xero, FreshBooks. There's a few different ones. I always use QuickBooks Online. They're tracking your transactions. Now, they may or may not do payroll. They may or may not do sales tax. They may or may not do payroll audits, you know, so you have to find out exactly what they do. But bottom line, they track transactions, income and outcome in your books for your financials. If you talk to someone and they say they're an accountant, they may or may not do bookkeeping. They may or may not do payroll. But bottom line, they do higher level accounting. So they create reports. They either do taxes or they do audits. They take that information and they help a business owner make decisions with it. So I hope that I've helped explain this a little bit, because I do get asked about it a lot. And I can totally see how it's confusing, because there are so many different terms and they mean similar things, but not the same. And they are overlapping and used interchangeably. So I hope that that helps clear it up. And again, if you have any questions, let me check in my Zoom. If anybody has any questions, doesn't look like it. All right. So if you have any questions, you can reach out to me. I do consultations for companies all the time, maya@solvencynow.com. You can go on my website to check out what we do, solvencynow.com. I have a profile here on Facebook, Maya Weinreb. I'm also under Solvency Now Bookkeeping. On LinkedIn, I'm under Maya Weinreb. On Instagram, I'm under Maya Weinreb, and on Solvency Now. So I'm easy to find. You can ask me any questions. I always answer all my communication and all my emails. And again, I just want to reiterate, because tax season is slowly going to be here in a blink of an eye. If you don't have your bookkeeping done, if you don't have a profit and loss and you don't have a balance sheet ready for 2021, run to your bookkeeper. If you don't have a bookkeeper, reach out to me. But you guys, you've got to do it now, because otherwise you're not going to get it done on time. All the bookkeepers are going to be slammed at the mid-August. No one's going to be able to just do whatever you need. It's first come, first serve. So come now if you want to get it done on time. And again, it is tax planning season right now for 2022. Of course, it goes in order, right? You got to do your 2021 books, file your 2021 taxes. And in order to do tax planning, you have to have your 2022 books up to date, so that the tax planner can see what's going on. They're going to need your tax return for 2021. They're going to need your books for 2021 and your books for 2022 to date, so that they can help you make the best decisions that are going to save you the most money in taxes, because you don't want to overpay the government. You want to, pay them what you're supposed to pay them and not a penny more. So tax planning season right now, you've got to get your books done. If you don't have your books done, that's the first thing that the tax planner is going to ask you for. So I'm going to remind you of that every week so that you guys don't forget. Now is the time. All right. Thank you all so much for coming. Thank you to my loyal fans for watching me talk about bookkeeping every week. Thank you for watching if you're on YouTube. And I will see you all again next week, same time, the Bottom Line Live, 7 p.m. Eastern on Thursdays. All right, bye.